This week, I have a great guest. I've been waiting to talk to him, and I know that he has a wealth of information to share with us. And some of you may be familiar with his website, truefreethinker.com. This week, I have Ken Ammi on. Ken?
Yes, sir.
Hey, thanks for being on, Ken. I've been looking forward to talking with you. I visited your website quite a bit in the past, and I was really happy to make contact with you on Twitter. So been looking forward to this.
Likewise.
So before we get really hot and heavy into any one subject, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, just for the people that don't know, and just your, I think I counted 18 books that you've written so far. Is that correct?
Oh, you must have miscounted. I actually always joke that I should know my own canon, but I haven't counted in a while. But I know it's somewhere between 45 and 50, probably.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was taking the simple way out, and I saw your, in your email, it has the picture of your book covers, some of your book covers. So I think there's 18 on there, and I just assumed that they were
right.
18.
Yeah. I mean, if I fit them all in a little snippet like that, that'd be too small to see, I guess.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Wow. That's amazing. That's a lot of books. And I just have aspirations to write one in my lifetime. So that's,
well, I'll tell you, one thing is, I always joke, but it's true. If I could memorize everything I've written in books, I would be a genius. But that doesn't seem to be happening.
Right, right.
And the thing is, there's times where I finish a book and I go, well, that's it. I'm tapped out. That's the end of it. And then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute. Here comes another one and another one and another one. So I'm writing a book currently, but I took a break from writing a book to write a different book. So that's just how it goes for me.
Well, a lot of people would just be thankful to have that problem on their hands.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. So you said the current book you're writing is about UFO and alien symbology in movies. Is that correct?
Well, it's about, movies that have alien and UFO themes in it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the thing is, I got up to about page 500 and I thought, okay, this is obviously going to turn into a series of books because I don't want to just put out a massive book on it. And then the more movies I thought of, the more I wanted to review. So that's it. I'm going to just turn it into shorter, less expensive books and turn it into a series because I think that makes it more digestible.
Yeah, I would think so, especially today with everyone's short attention span.
That too.
I love to read, and I've got a ton of books, and my wife keeps telling me, you need to stop buying so many books. We're running out of room. But, I kind of jump around in books. I'm really bad about that because usually I'm researching for a show or writing a blog, and I'm trying to get to certain information, so I have to turn in a specific page or chapter or several chapters, and which you don't really get to enjoy a book like that. But it just kind of goes with the territory, I guess.
Yes, it is true. I mean, I have maybe 4,000 books in my garage, and boy, I don't even know how to get rid of them nowadays. What am I supposed to do with them, right? But
right.
The thing is, yes, for a researcher, it is different. We maybe won't tend to read books cover to cover because instead of reading one whole book, we might read 5 or more books that contain information we need and just kind of pick out what we need from them. So it is a different sort of reading for a researcher, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why, for instance, I've been looking at a book recently that has no index. And to a researcher, that's just bad news.
Yeah, it sure is.
That's just a basic tool that we really need. And it's really annoying when that's not there.
Yeah, there is a fellow that I reference a lot in my shows. His name's Dennis L. Cuddy, and he's done a great job on really documenting the early rise of the New World Order and kind of from the kind of Cecil Rhodes days on up to the last few years. But most of his books do not have an index.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I spend so much time because he's a great researcher, and I don't know why that he doesn't go to the trouble of doing that. But that
And
is
I tell you
frustrating.
what, maybe 20 years ago, roughly, when I was first trying to get a book published, the publisher said, "Well, it'll cost $300-400 for an index." I was like, "Wait
Oh,
a minute! You mean the thing at the end of the book with the words and numbers? I'll do that myself." But
right,
the thing is, nowadays, you can do it in seconds with the Word program. Now it's almost
right.
automatic. It's totally different.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, the way that technology has changed the way that we can do research as well. I found
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. And I can imagine that you said that you're turning your newest project into a series, and there's just so much symbolism, and you just hear constantly nowadays about aliens or about UFOs in particular. Of course, it's been in movies for a long time, but it seems like it's even more so in movies now. And they even talk about UFOs in the mainstream news in the last few years too. So it's really prevalent that you hear about that.
That's one thing I was doing in my book is pulling out some of the stories just from 2020, where we think we found the water on the moon, we think we found the constituents of life on Venus, and then this government allegedly claims that we've had contact with aliens, and it's one news story after another one. Whereas it's almost like if you believed in, much less talked about UFOs and aliens, you were nuts. Where nowadays, if you deny it, you're nuts.
Right. Yeah, and in the meantime, the corporate news still won't even mention the Council on Foreign Relations, and they work directly with their government, and it's like it makes you wonder why they have chosen to start talking about it. Do you kind of feel that same way?
Well, I mean, it's almost like the way 2020 has worked out, or the way that it's been designed, is you just get a blender, you throw every one of even the wackiest conspiracy theories you'd ever imagine, and you hit blend, and there's 2020, just everything. I mean, it's over. It's frankly, it's overwhelming. I
You're
find
right.
it overwhelming. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you're correct.
yeah, so form an orderly line to apologize to all those people you've been calling nuts for all these years.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
now it's out in the open. It's like, hey, NASA through the Navy through NASA is saying, yeah, we have these videos of we don't know what, some kind of craft, and everyone's like, what's next?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's so we get used to things so quickly, and it's just amazing to think about what all we get used to, and we're just like, oh yeah, I'm tired of that. Go on to the next thing, and it makes you wonder if things will continue to be like that. The crazier and crazier the world becomes, if it does become more crazy.
Well, it's like Bill Maher once stated that he says, watch movies from 20 years ago because everything in movies comes to life.
That's true.
So
Yeah,
then you
that.
get into the issue of, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? The
Hmm.
classic question, right? Which is
Right.
actually a classic false dichotomy because it's both. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one thing I was focusing on in this book is every bit of fiction is based on somebody's real life worldview. You can't escape it.
hmm
Or else your story would be so absolutely abstract. It would be just, it would be unwatchable, incomprehensible. It would just be more like some kind of phantasmagoric acid trip or something. And I mean, that might be fun for some people sometimes, but it wouldn't make for a good story, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, and you I wonder too, like everybody kind of has their own ideas, but there was a book I think in the late 60s called The Report from Iron Mountain, and it was supposedly a government insider who wrote the book, and then later on, from what I've read, they said no, the author said, no, he wasn't a government insider. But it was this series of all these different programs that supposedly the federal government had as backup plans for different scenarios. And one was to stage an alien invasion if the people ever got too out of hand and started pushing back against the government. And so it kind of makes you wonder. I think even Ronald Reagan mentioned in a speech something to that effect, that it would take something like an alien invasion to bring the people together or something like that. I forget now.
Yes, you're right. Reagan was extremely explicit, having said that more than once, that he could see that bringing the world together.
So it does kind of make you wonder what, if the powers that be have something planned for us. Is it going to be real? Is it going to be fake? What's the going to be the reasoning behind it? It's it's up in the air, but one can't help but wonder what they're doing.
Right, because potentially something like that would not only potentially bring the world together in terms of, so I guess the first thing to deal with isn't exactly. It'd be like, are the supposed aliens benevolent or malevolent? Because it doesn't actually matter, because both potentially would bring the world together, right? To either fight against them or else accept them, since in a way they could really cut through any division, right? Even sociopolitical divisions and religious divisions, they could potentially cut through all of them and just be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And, of course, a lot of people, the ancient aliens theory, and, a lot of people think that we came from aliens, and that's kind of, you see that pushed a lot more in the last few years as well.
So, because in a way, it's the more secular a society becomes, the more pagan it becomes. And then there's also a seeking for something above and beyond, something transcendent. And if you're taking a secularist view, then what's greater than humanity? It would have to be some kind of other, right? Some wholly other thing. And if you're not willing to say that that's God, then it has to be something like an alien, right?
Right, exactly.
And then you get into this weird thing I consider a non sequitur, which is high tech, ergo high spirituality. And that's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily follow. Right? I mean, what if our astronauts landed on an inhabited planet? Is the fact that they're good engineers also mean that they're good theologians or spiritualists or whatever you want to call it? And in fact, from what we know, our astronauts would likely start teaching those aliens Freemasonry, right? Or something like that. And so just because the higher echelon Earth has to offer aliens would have these views doesn't mean humanity as a whole shares them. And in fact, that's one thing that was fascinating about the atheist Carl Sagan's book, Contact, is that there's a preacher on there who opposes sending that particular person to meet aliens because she's an atheist. And he says, therefore, she doesn't represent the majority of humanity. And I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
So,
Never thought about it.
Aliens come here and they have high tech. So what qualifies them to tell us, to set us straight about our theology?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
That's true. And there seems to be, so many of these things, it's like the bumper sticker, everything's connected. And I'm sure you would probably agree with me. When you start to research the occult and a lot of these ancient beliefs and the secret societies, so many things do have a connection. And it's, you can almost follow the path and connect everything. But I was reading a book. I think it's called The Spirit of Freemasonry. I did this series on Freemasonry on my show, and I wanted to go deeper than most of the Christian researchers that I had listened to or read. I wanted to go deeper and mainly read from the actual Masonic texts and Masonic writers. So I was reading this book, Spirit on Freemasonry, and it was by Foster Bailey, who was Alice Bailey from Lucius Trust's husband. And, she was the big theosophist and everything. And, most of it was just your kind of run-of-the-mill Freemasonry and this brotherhood of man and things that you would read from, like Albert Mackey and Manly P. Hall and stuff like that. Of course, Manly P. Hall can get pretty deep into the mystical part too. But he says near the end, he starts talking about the star Sirius, the dog star, and how they believe, or at least he believes, and some Freemasons believe, that we originally came from that star and that we're going to get back to that star. And when we get there, if there's life on that star, we will teach them Freemasonry.
Wow, yeah.
So, it was pretty far out there. I was a bit surprised. It was right near the end, so he saved it till the last.
Roped you all the way in and then hit you with that, huh?
Right. Like, we're going to have this brotherhood of man, and we're going to take it to Sirius, and have their utopia. I guess their new Atlantis on Sirius.
Sounds like what people say about Scientology is you think you got into it to help you deal with your emotional and psychological issues. And next thing you know, you're in the middle of a space opera. Like quite literally.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I found this, there's this, I'm kind of embarrassed to say I go there, but it's kind of this oddities shop down from my house. And this guy gets all these just the craziest things you could imagine, things you would see in like some kind of Jim Rhodes sideshow from the 90s. But he gets all these esoteric and occult books, and he sells them for like three books for $10, and you can't beat it if you can find some of the good books there. And I found a really, really old Scientology book, and it has all of their terms in it, and it tells you what each term means. And I thumbed through that thing. It's only about maybe 70 pages long. And it is so obvious that L. Ron Hubbard just made up words to mean certain things, and took words that already had meanings and just gave them different meanings. It was just insane that people can, be roped into that, especially that particular, cult, I would say, because it is so far out there. It's just mind-blowing.
That's actually an aspect that is pushed in Scientology, is that if you are reading something and you encounter a word you don't know, you need to stop and look it up, which is actually very important and good common sense as well.
Right.
But yeah, that's, as a researcher, that would be, for me, part of the reason I definitely would want to do that, because there's people who will use the same terms to mean very different things.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I remember I wrote a book about the Baha'i world faith, and I ended up writing a dictionary within the book, because I realized they're using so many words and giving them their own meaning that I have to end up doing this so people can just have a easy reference to understand what they're saying.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Because, a lot of things, just researching the Freemasonry, of course, they have words that have 2 or 3 meanings sometimes. And with the Scientology, it just kind of surprised me, because he'll put 2 words together sometimes, and it's like, these words don't belong together, but yet he says they have a certain meaning. And it's pretty amazing what he was able to do with that religion and make it such or not really a religion, it's a cult, but just to all these celebrities and just the money that it brings in, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I just recently, researching for my latest book, I was reading somebody who was saying that Stephen Greer might be the next L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, okay.
Because the way I likened it in the book is, I don't know if you're aware of Alex Jones' famous statement, and you'll pardon my terminology, but he talked about a turd in the punch bowl. Do you recall that off the top of your head?
It sounds vaguely familiar. Please refresh me.
Yeah, so he was talking about David Icke. And he says David Icke is like a turd in a punch bowl because Icke comes out with all this great information against the New World Order and exposing a lot of very important and real things. And you're going along saying, yes, all right, this is great information. Thank you. And all of a sudden he goes off about shape-shifting reptilians. And that's why Jones said that's like the turd in the punch bowl. You're enjoying this refreshing punch, all this new information, and all of a sudden, boom, oh, what's this, And so it's kind of the same for me with Greer. It's like, okay, I have all these documents. Okay, I've heard from government officials. Okay, and I've briefed government officials. Okay, great. And all of a sudden, hey, now you can join this, I don't know, I'm going to call it a cult, where we get together and we undergo ritualistic initiations to summon aliens. Well, what happened there? What happened here? I mean, all of a sudden it's like, okay, I was following you along for the information and the disclosure and also the important points he makes about energy. And all of a sudden, wait a minute. You want me to perform these occult rituals to summon quote unquote aliens?
Getting a little, a little too far, my friend. Too far, too soon.
Right.
I kind of feel that way. Not that he's actually starting a group like that, but I kind of feel that way about the writings of Jordan Maxwell.
Oh yeah.
He's and he's really influenced a lot of people, but yeah, and he's not wrong about everything. I feel that he's correct about a lot of things towards government and the way the government works and the the shadow government and how that works in the background and things like that. But then he kind of twists. He'll twist the etymologies of words, and sometimes he's correct on words, but others he takes a lot of liberties. And he says that he's talked to these. I don't know if he refers to them as aliens or otherworldly beings, but I've seen a couple of interviews where he said he did speak to them and he asked them not to harm him. And then I think he even said something like he asked them if he could work for them or do their bidding or something like that. And I think this guy, he's really old now. Of course, he's revered in the truther community. But I think, a lot of the stuff the guy says is, frankly, it's BS. You really have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and discern what is truth from fiction.
Right, like the old claim about how in the Bible, King Solomon is not an actual person, but it's 3 different words for sun, S-U-N, right? Sol, and on.
Right.
But it's like, dude, that's only in English. His Hebrew name is Shlomo.
Right. Yeah.
And so Shlomo, you're not going to get 3 words for sun out of Shlomo. That's the kind of level of stuff we're dealing with, unfortunately. But yeah, recently, I'm actually emailing you. You don't have to look at it now, but I'm emailing you a link to something I put up on Twitter very recently, which is exactly him talking about how he got marching orders from Alien and that he actually dated an alien hybrid.
Wow.
That was his girlfriend.
Well, I love it. I would like to do just a show on kind of debunking him one day, because he has said so many things that are untrue. I'm sure you probably know this, but for anyone who's listening to this or who will listen to this, he got his name from a Helena Blavatsky book,
Right.
Isis Unveiled 2. There was a god in there, Jordanus Maximus, I guess is how you pronounce it. So I do not trust anything that guy says. I mean, like I said, there is some truth to some of the things he says, but
Right.
people need to really be cautious about him and Zechariah Sitchin and some of these other
Yes.
guys.
In fact, I was just looking on Twitter and I realized you replied sending a reference to a book called Prophet of Zeitgeist, a critique of Jesus' mythicism and of Jordan Maxwell
Yes.
by Albert McIlhenny.
Yeah. It's funny. That guy wrote around the time of Zeitgeist, maybe a year or so after, that guy wrote a series of books. I think there's only one or two in print, but he has the rest you can get on Kindle. And I've tried to find that fellow because I've got 3 of those books and they're great. And one's just, the one I sent you is just debunking Jordan Maxwell, but he takes on the whole notion that Jesus was just a take on the sun god, different sun gods and different things like that. And I cannot find that guy. I don't know. He's just, I'd love to interview him, but I cannot find out how to reach him.
Yeah, well, see, I mean, it's true of every, whatever you want to call them, truthers, conspiracy theorizers, or exposers, or whatever, where many of them, yeah, of course, they're coming out with a lot of really good and apparently true information that exposes some interesting stuff. And then there comes that turd into the punch bowl, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're listening to Jordan Maxwell, and okay, that's true. Okay, I get that. Oh, that's useful. And then you go, wait a minute, this etymology stuff totally doesn't work. And all of a sudden, he's talking about getting marching orders from aliens. Whoa. What just happened here, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, I've read, I don't know if it's true, but you had mentioned, I think you mentioned David Icke.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's kind of another one, that I would fit into that category. And I think that he, Sitchin, and Maxwell are all friends and have been friends for quite a while from what I've read. But you just kind of wonder about these guys. Are they working for some group to spread disinformation, or are they just, do they actually believe this stuff, or are they disinfo agents? It kind of, there's no real way to know, I guess.
There isn't, except that when we look at them individually, most of them end up attempting to place themselves in the center of history, as it were, where, for instance, David Icke originally claimed he was the return of Jesus.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. You can go on YouTube any day of the week and just look that up. It's right there. And Maxwell, right, saying that he was basically the chosen vessel for these aliens and telling them what to do. And there's so many people who end up like that, like L. Ron Hubbard, claiming that he had finally unlocked the secret to human health and happiness, and emotional and spiritual and psychological health, and you name it. Whitley Strieber, talking about how he, in a past life, he played an influential role in ancient Rome. And of course, he's been there, done that. He conveniently ends up having memories of whatever's hip at the moment. Oh, I just remembered that I've been there, I've done that. I was on the moon. I was on Mars, actually. I saw the face on Mars. I was there. All this.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, all of them. Again, whether they're attached to some kind of handlers or not, they all end up sort of drinking their own Kool-Aid, in a manner of speaking.
Well, I do remember, I can't remember what podcast it was, but they talked about Ike's first book and how it was just straight up a New Age book, promoting New Age beliefs. And I remember thinking at the time that I wonder if he is trying to, purposely spread disinformation. Because if you think about it, an intelligent person who is the least bit skeptical can tell that there are issues with governments of the world, but especially the U.S. government. You can kind of see that there's problems and there's things we've not been told, and there, just all these different issues, and that's pretty easy. So if someone wanted to be a disinfo agent, and they were the least bit skeptical, or an insider especially, then they could easily point those things out, and then add all these other things in to even confuse people further. So I think that people definitely should think about that. I know there's and it's just a quick little video that someone took, but it's a video of Sitchin and Maxwell sitting beside each other, giving each other a handshake, and they first do the normal handshake like you and I would give, and then they do one of the Freemason handshakes, and it's so obvious. I've never seen, because you try to see sometimes in pictures, are they giving one of those Freemason handshakes? This was the most obvious one I've ever seen in my life. And after that, I kind of took I kind of become obsessive there for a couple of weeks, trying to look into Maxwell, and I found out that one of his assistants had, I guess Maxwell wouldn't pay him. This was probably going back 10 years ago. And so this guy made a series of videos, and I think they're still on YouTube. And he just kind of tells you all kinds of things about Maxwell. But he said he is indeed a Freemason. But he had, at one point, he had a hidden camera in his pocket, and he went to a diner with Maxwell and got Maxwell to divulge this information. And Maxwell's sitting there feeding his face like you can imagine he would, and talking about how he sold the rights to all his books and his videos to his former agent and it was something like $20,000. Not a lot of money for someone who has his name recognition. And then he really was talking about how he regretted it. And then he says plainly on there that somehow he got in touch with this fella from, I think he said somewhere from Africa. I can't remember specifically. And he was basically like a mafia type of guy from there. And the guy told him that he would get the rights back to his work if he could give him something like $10,000. It was something that wasn't that much for him. And so he said he did it, and lo and behold, he got his rights back to all his work. But, I looked a little deeper, and I found that his former webmaster from his old website corroborated what that assistant had said, that he wouldn't pay them, he was a Freemason, that he was kind of a disinfo agent and really just in it to try to get attention and to make a buck. So, it's like I said, I think people can still find the assistant. And I'm talking, he did maybe 10 videos, and they're each at least 30, 45 minutes apiece. So if anyone's interested.
Yeah, there's something similar talking about African connections. One of David Icke's mentors is named Credo Mutwa. And he claims he was initiated into the Zulu mysteries by cannibalizing a human head.
Wow.
Just in terms of the kind of caliber of guy you're going to have be your mentor,
Right.
Oh, you cannibalized a human head to be initiated into Zulu mysteries. Yeah, what do you got for me? And then he claims that subsequently he's also eaten alien flesh that temporarily gave him some kind of extrasensory abilities. And he also claims he had sex with an alien, by the way.
Well, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah. But then he says, if you ever encounter an alien and you want to ward them off, right? You want to scare them off so they'll leave you alone. The best thing you could do is to start having sex with the person you're with.
Oh.
I have a feeling he sees a lot of aliens.
Right, exactly.
And so, it's almost like, whatever this guy says, David Icke says, okay, I got that from the source, the Zulus must know what they're talking about. And this guy who's been through that and said all these things, he's my guy,
Yeah.
As far as Sitchin, back in the day, when I could read books cover to cover quite easily, I probably read 10 or 11 of his books. And the unique thing about him is that he was allegedly in such an obscure field of ancient languages that there's not many people that could kind of meet him at that level, except I do know that Dr. Michael Heiser was qualified and did challenge him to a debate. And for about a decade, Sitchin never took him up on it.
Interesting.
And so Michael Heiser ended up putting up a website called Sitchin is Wrong.
I've been on that once or twice.
Looking at it from a scholarly level. It's very simple stuff, really. It's like, well, Sitchin claims that in these ancient texts, it says this. Let's do a research of every known text in that genre and language, and it's not there. It's really like that basic, just when it comes down to it.
Yeah. I've been on that website a couple of times, and it's a great resource. Michael Heiser, I'm sure a lot of people still don't know about him. I don't hear the name too often, except in Christian circles, French Christian circles. But he's a great.
I hear it all the time, but just because I'm so involved in discussing issues related to angels, demons, Nephilim, giants, all that stuff, so I run into it all the time.
Gotcha. Yeah. He's a great resource. And yeah, there's just so much information out there, of course, thanks to the World Wide Web. And it's people can really get overloaded really quickly. And I think I can't remember who I had on. I think it was a podcaster by the name of Jim Duke, but we were just talking about how when people first, there's a lot of people that are waking up that are kind of newly are kind of just realizing that things aren't quite the way we've been told in school and with news and pop culture. And a lot of people go straight to nihilism. They become these nihilists who think that every single thing we've ever been told is incorrect. And I get that. I totally get that. And you really become so skeptical that you don't want to believe anything. But, after you've been in, looking into things for a while, you start to kind of settle out of that and realize that, I just need to pray for discernment and really be vigilant in studying things. And that way, you start to realize what has credibility and what doesn't. And I think a lot of these guys, like Ike, really appeal to those people who have just become total nihilists. And, it's good for them to look into people like you who have such a wealth of knowledge and information. And I can tell that you obviously do your research. And that's what people want, when they're waking up. And I've noticed that the average person, they don't want to read anything. They just want to tune into their favorite talking head and be told what to think. And as long as it kind of goes along with what they already believe, they're fine. But a lot of people do want to read and to tune into people who they trust have researched things deeply. And I think that's very important nowadays, more than ever.
It is. And for me, it's kind of, it became important for me to figure out what kind of person I am. Because, for instance, before I got married and had kids, I spent 8-10 hours a day reading and writing because I had the time. Whereas, okay, well, that changed.
Yeah, right.
So you kind of have to be aware of your time management. And then also I know a couple of people who seem to be genuine know-it-alls. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, they do know a lot about a lot of stuff. And that's just not me. Where for me, if I'm going to open my mouth to talk about something, I'm going to make sure I know what I'm talking about. And for me, that means doing a ridiculous amount of focused research. So for instance, issue of Nephilim and Giants, I've written 4 to 6 books. It depends how you count them, because I wanted to specialize in that area. And where there's people who, friends or just anyone online will say, hey, have you heard of this? Have you seen that? Here's a video, here's an article, here's the this and that. And I'll tell them, maybe I'll get to that someday. But right now, since I'm focused on something else, I'm not even going to. And that comes finding people who seem to be reliable enough that, if I really do want to know something from a reliable enough source, just so I can be aware of it, I'll go to these guys, get what I need right away, and then go back to what I'm doing. Because that's one thing I learned a long time ago, is chasing every rabbit hole, chasing the rabbit down every rabbit hole. It can be easily overwhelming, and then you end up more with a surface level understanding of a lot of issues instead of a deep understanding of a few issues.
Right.
So for me, those are kind of my limitations. And they're also mental limitations. Like I have a hard time understanding something unless I've researched it in minute detail, and then I can finally get the big picture, and then I end up writing a book, because that helps me process it and put things into order. It's very therapeutic for me. And then afterwards, I could talk about it. I'm definitely not going to remember all the details, but at least I'll be able to give you an overview of the subject. And there's times where I've thought to myself, I know I wrote about this. I'm going to have to look at my own book to see what I wrote. I mean, when
that's
it comes
fantastic.
down, yeah. I mean, so for me, it's just about what kind of person are you, right? Are you able to really digest a lot of information about a lot of issues, or are you better more at like finding a niche and focusing and becoming like an expert in that? And that's been very important, to just kind of realize I'm me. I'm not somebody else. It's like I really enjoy working out with weights, right? People who start lifting weights tend to fall into a typical problem, which is you think to yourself, well, how do I learn about weightlifting? Oh, well, there's professional bodybuilders. Okay, I'll do what they're doing. Really? Me, Joe Average guy, I'm going to start working and eating like a professional bodybuilder who's like 300 pounds and is also injecting all sorts of crazy drugs, by the way. I'm supposed to follow their advice? And then you end up realizing, okay, that's not working for me. I'm not like that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because there's probably quite a few people out there that don't have the courage to kind of step out and, either write a book or even just do research and write a blog or start a podcast. I know I wanted to start a podcast for months, and I didn't have the nerve to do it until really a stranger reached out to me, and he said, look, you need to stop with these blogs. You've got so much to say. You need to do a podcast. And I don't know, it kind of clicked with me, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try it. I'm going to finally try it. But there's a lot of people out there that need to understand what you just said. They can pick a certain subject that they're interested in and focus on that and let that be their center of attention. And then, once they feel maybe that they've accomplished all that they can accomplish on that one subject, then perhaps they can move on to something else,
In fact, the way I like to do it is if I somehow latch onto a subject, I'll tend to avoid anything anybody is saying about it, and I'll just look at it myself, and then I'll come to my own conclusions. And then when I think I'm done, then I'll look at people I find reliable to see what they said about it. So sometimes I go, oh, yes, I missed this. And oh, that's a good point there. And then I can kind of just clean it up. But going through that process is very important. And part of it, too, is something we already touched upon that to me is actually incredibly important, which is to define terms. That can never be overlooked. I mean, even like when we started talking about aliens and UFOs, what on earth does that mean, right? We talked about Nephilim and giants. What does that mean? We talked about really anything we talk about. It's important to define the term and set the table for a discussion, because I can't tell you how many times people try to just sort of jump into the middle of a discussion with me, and I have to fight so hard to get them to, wait a minute. What do you mean when you say this? What are we even talking about? Why? Let's back up and understand what we're even supposed to be talking about.
I'm looking at your website right now, and I see, I mean, all your books sound right up my alley. But I see here Cain as serpent seed of Satan, and I see volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think that's awesome. That's fantastic, because that is such a controversy. And my audience is going to be like, not again. But
that's great if you've already dealt with it, because it's a very obscure subject in a way. But then when you get around people who are into it, it becomes very, very serious too.
Well, I was going to say that I haven't really delved into it deeply as far as just that one subject, but I have mentioned it several times because there's this book that kind of changed my perspective on really how the occult, or at least how Freemasons and Rosicrucians look at the world. And it was this book called Freemasonry and Catholicism. And the author was a Rosicrucian named Max Heindel. And so in there, he says that the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons believe that mankind has been wrapped up in this battle for the soul of the world, and really it all goes back to the lineage of Cain, which they of course believe that Eve was impregnated by the fallen angel Samael, and that they believe that Seth and Cain were only half brothers. So the world's been in this battle between the lineage of Seth and Cain. Have you heard that? Did that come up in your studies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's where those 5 books came from. And incidentally, I wrote 5 of them because that's just how I am. If I'm going to look at this issue, I'm going to look at it from every conceivable angle. And that's why it turned into into a series, because there was so much to cover. Like, what's the biblical data? Then one whole book is just about me discussing it with a person who believes that. So the whole book is just our discussion, a guy named Zen Garcia. And then another one is just about how white supremacists have really abused that concept to be racists. And another one, so there, I just kind of looked at it from every angle I could think of. But see, what's important here is that you said it's about how they look at the world, right? Because, okay, if we say that the claim is that Eve had sex with the fallen angel Samael, that is how they look at the world. But then the other question is that really an accurate view of the world, or the word in this case? Because for one, Samael is a figure from rabbinic Jewish folklore. That would be something you would find like in a Targum from the 600s or something, which inserts that into the text of Genesis 3. Because by definition, a Targum is not an Aramaic translation, it's a paraphrase. And so that's where that name comes from. So biblically, it's the serpent, which we end up finding out is the devil or Satan. And he's actually not even a fallen angel. He's a fallen cherub. So yeah, the claim is just as you said it, but there's nothing to it in the Bible. That's just, it is not there. It doesn't exist. It just, it's totally convoluted. And what I found is that people who hold to that theory, they really like playing gotcha games. Like they'll ask a lot of gotcha questions. So if they ask you a question they perceive you won't be able to answer, then they gotcha. And I have the answer, and the answer is this serpent seed theory, which is not really cogent. I mean, it's a non sequitur, really. Maybe I don't have an answer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your theory is validated. Mm-hmm. So, for example, here's a good one. They'll ask you, hey, if Eve's sin had nothing to do with sex, then how come they suddenly realize they're naked and her punishment is pain in childbirth? If you don't know the answer, then it's because the sin was sex, right? And then it makes sense. Yeah. When they state it that way, it makes sense. As long as you forget Genesis 4:1, which specifically states that Adam knew his wife and she conceived and bare Cain. It's that simple.
Right.
But then you need to think about, well, what is it that we're told about Eve? Not very much. I mean, we're told that she ends up being called Eve because she's the mother of all living. So then you think, well, if we're told so very little about her, then it's important to really take seriously and incorporate the little bit that we are told about her. So if we're told that she's the mother of all living, then we understand why her curse would have something to do with pain in childbirth. Mm. It's just like Adam. If, incidentally, isn't this interesting? If eating the fruit of the forbidden tree is symbolic of sex with Satan, well, guess what? Adam also ate of that same exact fruit. So what does that tell you? Right?
Right.
But why was his curse to have to really labor hard and work the ground to have it produced for him? Well, because the little bit we're told about Adam is that, well, the way I put it is his hobby was gardening. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of a hobby. But his curse was, now you're actually going to have to work the land. You're really going to have to work it to get it to produce for you. So again, the little bit that we're told about them is connected to their curse. And so what ends up happening is you get this concept of a wicked line of Cain versus a righteous or holy line of Seth, right? Mm-hmm. But that's biblically a myth. It's not there. It doesn't exist. I mean, there's nowhere in the Bible that it tells you any such thing, that all Cainites were somehow wicked or corrupt or evil, and Sethites were all righteous and holy, especially for people who take that point of view and then read it into Genesis 6, where they say the sons of God are actually Sethites, who were the righteous line, who all of a sudden decided to become sinners for some odd reason. So none of it makes sense. But again, it's about how they look at the world. They're reading these man-made myths into their interpretations of history and reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And you know, it's amazing when you do start to look into a lot of these occult beliefs, because so many of them take parts of the Bible and twist them for their ideologies. And I never knew that when I was younger. I just knew that they weren't Christian, and but then once I got to just really in the last 6-7 years look into these things, I've just been amazed at how they do take certain parts from the Bible and twist them. And like you were saying with the Freemasons and King Solomon, what they try to do with his name and split it up in those three different names. And that's just one thing, of course, there's just dozens and dozens of things that they've tried to twist from the Bible and turn into their own legends. And so many people take that, they believe those things are real. And it kind of just goes right back to, kind of like the way Jordan Maxwell twists words. They twist things, and then people that don't know any better are like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand that. And, it's just one of those things in life where people are so easily fooled if they don't equip themselves with the knowledge, and they can really be taken if they don't have the discernment and haven't put the time into research.